Charles Mangushampagi. Let me start by welcoming the guy who started this show. Now works with the BBC. Alan Kasuja, very nice to have you back.
Thank you for having me back.
Great. Let me also introduce Chris Obore. It was Chris Obore, Alan Kasuja, and a few other guys who are here.
Frank
Tumwebaze, Angelo Izama.
Yes.
We should have invited the Frank today. Today with the Alan here.
No, Alan got Frank on the show, and then Frank got promoted and became a minister. And so he's been
Alan found the show with Tumwebaze founded the show with Alan.
Yes. And then I said he met him, grew his political profile.
I don't know what Frank will say about that.
I don't know,
but maybe the show contributed to his profile growth.
Maybe.
Who knows?
And Mary Mutesi. Mary is a lawyer. She works in the office of the spokesperson of the National Resistance Movement. Mary, very nice to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. A pleasure to meet Alan and Chris.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah.
And after a long time, you were the second female guild president of Makerere University.
Yeah, actually, there is a little, just before the show, we were speaking about record keeping. The truth is that I contested. But I contested, that was the time of Odonga Oto, Thomas Ochana Ye, and the other David Ebong. Some of them are members of parliament. And that was a contest after Sarah Kajingo, when she was a female. I put up a very good spirited fight until the slaughter came from Galloway. So Ronnie Mukuye, whom most people don't know, actually became Guildy president.
He was Ismail B.
And I was, yes, I was vice Guildy president.
Okay.
But because I had been in the race before and I had the other massive support at main campus, everybody took it that I'm the Guildy president. So the records are actually Ronnie Mukuye, who is now in UPDF.
So you are deputy guild.
I was vice Guildy president here.
We'll be discussing 29 years of President Yoweri Museveni of the National Resistance Movement. Many people say, officially, this day is celebrated on 26th, which will be tomorrow morning, starting tomorrow morning in Teso. But actually, the takeover was on 25th, only delayed for avoidance of certain coincidences, I've been told.
Historical coincidences.
Yes, historical coincidence and keeping of records that we're talking about.
And for the sake of those who don't understand, it's when? What is the historical coincidence?
The historical coincidence, the takeover by Idi Amin.
Happened on the 25th of January.
So some people weren't comfortable to have the takeover of Museveni coincide with Amin's takeover. Yeah.
But the difference between 25th and 26th is actually 24 hours. Not so big.
It is.
Okay.
It makes a significant difference.
Not a big one.
For certain people. Alan, you're watching, you've been in this country, you've been a journalist in this country, and now you're watching this country and reporting on it and in a global context at the BBC. I keep asking myself the question. Tomorrow we commemorate another anniversary for President Yoweri Museveni and the NRM. And all these, Ofono Ponda was writing today in the Sunday Vision, talking about 29 years of progress. Do you get a feeling sometimes that we either have set our bar so low to celebrate achievements that we could have achieved more, or is the progress made in the last 29 years consistent with what we could have achieved as a country?
I think depending on who you speak to, some people will argue that it depends on what you had 29 years ago. What did you have? We had wars, and we had a lot of uncertainty. And then you look back to the last 29 years and wonder if anything has changed. And majority will agree that Uganda is relatively peaceful, that if you're considering just security, well, that has been taken care of. But there will be questions as to whether or not a lot more could have been achieved over the last 30 years. Is it possible that the hospitals could be better run? Is it possible that that Mulago Hospital would have been a regional, when I say regional, I'm referring to countries, referral hospital? Is it possible that the kids that are produced from our schools would have been of a much better quality than what we see at the moment? And I think those are the questions that you have lingering, that what have we done with that sort of 29 years of tranquility? What has that evolved? Has it, is it possible that corruption could have been handled differently? And whatever achievements we have had over the last 29 years, there will still be questions about what more could have been done. And I think in the course of discussions, that's almost inevitable. You will continue asking. It's very difficult to sit back and say we have achieved. And I think it's that restlessness that will keep us moving.
Mary, let me put this to you. You hung around the NRM hotshots and you are a party member.
Yes.
Do you think that, what are you celebrating tomorrow? What exactly?
Charles, it would be naive on my side to downplay the voices that actually look at the other side of the coin. The truth is that we've had tremendous development. Of course, I'm very young. I will not say you shall remember where we came from, but when we read the few records that are in place, we discover that actually we are moving at least in the right direction. But also safe to say we've had challenges, and the challenges are sometimes presented as weaknesses or failures. But on the whole, at least Ugandans have a reason to celebrate and to commemorate 26th as a Liberation Day. My senior Alani Kasuja speaks of a few of them, and he's speaking of the health sector, speaking of the education sector. Another person will speak of the economy and the way we are moving on. The infrastructure development on a whole, maybe it has not been up to the expectations of some people, but also we should look at the political continuum of Uganda. Where was Uganda got at such a time when the liberators were coming in?
Yes. That keeps coming up.
Yes.
Have we, or has the NRM tied this country so much to its history of vulnerability that you keep reminding people, where did we come from? Where did we come from? And we have failed to think much ahead.
But also, the great writers wrote and said a man who doesn't look at where he's coming from probably may not appreciate where he is. And also, if you don't appreciate where you are, you may not be able also to look at tomorrow, the coming. So I think it's very important. We've just been talking about the colonial legacy that was left and certain infrastructure that actually shall remind the people. I think it's very important. You were speaking of even the museums and all that, historical sites, and Alan was speaking of so many. Sorry to bring the background conversation in here, but it illustrates the point that the reason why we are craving actually to see some of those things, it's because we want to be reminded of the history. That is the only way we can appreciate of where we are and be able even to plan best for the future. The point, Alan, before you come in, the point I wanted to make that when you look at the political continuum, when you look at the economic continuum of the country, where was the country brought from? It was got from the negative, not even zero.
Chris,
yes.
Was this country so much broken down that we must be tied 29 years on to where we were and to justify anything that we haven't done as a country, as a people?
Of course, if you measure it from propagandist point of view, you will find
Chris
that
has
the
not changed.
country was broken down from the propagandist point of view. But we need to offer objective analysis because essentially Uganda is here. Whatever happens, with or without Museveni, it is good we can't recall Uganda. Nothing will wipe it away. But we discuss this to try to address the challenges. Before we even assess the NRM 29 years, we ought to understand what were the objectives of the NRM. Are they clear? If I can remember a few of them.
The 10-point program.
Yeah, it was there.
They taught us that in school.
Are they still the same? Have they changed? Why did they change? Did they change them? If they haven't changed, to what extent have they been achieved? Let's talk about security. Let's give them credit. They restored a sense of security. Kampala is one of the safest cities around the world, given the global challenges of terrorism. You still can walk in Kampala. Even when they hit us, we're still able to go back to bars. We are still, life is moving on. I want to talk about reconstructing the state, because you talk about the breakage of security then, we talk about Idi Amin days and that kind of thing. Now the state has been reconstructed. We can't remove it from them. But there is a very important point they made, objective they had. It was building a self-sustaining, integrated, too many sounding words, I don't even remember them, economy. But when you look at that and see what's happening today, you discover NRM has not scored. In spite of the things
you can be certain, Chris, that tomorrow President Museveni will tell you the revenue collection in 1996 and the revenue collection today.
It doesn't matter what he's going to say. He's supposed to say what he's going to say. We are supposed to help him see what he doesn't see. On that point of building a self-sustaining, integrated economy, something like that, NRM has totally collapsed. And they're not seeing it. Why am I saying that? The peasant in Uganda is totally detached from Uganda's economy. There are no economic benefits to them. Increasingly, we have seen the growth of a mafia class. In fact, Uganda's economy is run about by 10 or 15 people.
Really?
That's how dangerous it is, yes. It's run by 10 or 15 people.
Can you name them?
With their global allies. These are not running the economy. So integrating the peasant, as they talked about, has failed. I don't see food from Kaberemaido, food from Kabale. Last week I told you, Kisoro is suffering from high malnutrition. During the NRM, 29 years, high malnutrition figures in Kisoro. So, instead of building that economy, it has been disintegrating it and building a group that now runs our affairs. The other thing, Charles, you need to acknowledge is that NRM has ushered us into a mode of present-orientedness than future-orientedness. So there is a sense of immediate gratification that everybody is seeking. Right from those who are in P7, they are looking at immediately school, I hit this. So what they are saying as achievements are based on the present-orientedness. Okay. We have a road, we have put you this, hold on there. But there is no mechanism we can say, yes, Nambole, you have got a sports facility, go and look at it. At that time, it was a big thing to flag around. Now, you see, we are moving forward. Now we have a very good stadium. Nambole is going to do this. It last had the pain when the Chinese left. You see the point? So these are the issues we are going to look at in our economy.
I need Alan to come in. Do we, as a country, need a better appreciation of that history? Because he talks about from the propagandist view. And sometimes when the picture is painted of the breakdown of the state before the NRM took over, you imagine there was utter chaos. But that same state, Timothy Karegeya, who should have been part of this discussion, would argue and say, banks still functioned, and you could go and find a manager even at the heat of the war. There was a public bus transport that transported children for free from Kasese to Kampala, from Lira to Kampala if they're going to study, if they're wearing the uniform or had an identification. That there are certain aspects that you could go to Malago Hospital and still get some treatment. Some of those things, you can't guarantee them now.
I think there will be questions about whether or not the NRM has moved with us fast with the changes that have taken place in Uganda. The population has grown exponentially since 1986. The population is much younger now. What message is being put across to the population? Is it a message that still reminds them of 1986, way before they were born? Remembering again that, if I remember correctly, that Uganda is the youngest population in the world, with majority falling under 15 years of age. I think one of the things when you're putting a communication message together is context is what creates connection. What are you saying? How are you saying it? And is it really reaching to the people that
to whom are you saying it?
Exactly. Are you really making a connection with the person that you're saying it? And I think many people will say that that's what NRM's challenge has been. That many of their achievements might have been lost in the fact that there is a non-existent, they keep referring to 1986. And when you're talking to tech-savvy 19-year-olds who make the majority of this population, they don't understand what you're talking about, because they still go back home and there's no electricity, they still go back home and there's no water, they still go back, they go to Mulago Hospital and there are women giving birth on floors and all these things, and they're not clear about what you're saying. I think what might need to happen, again, depending on who you speak to, there might be a need for NRM to sort of review how it speaks and what it says, what message it carries, because clearly the people that it was talking to 20 years ago are not the same people it talks to now. It's a totally different generation with different aspirations and different...
But there are different ways NRM can speak, Alan. One of the things that pointing us as their challenge is their creation. A 10-year-old going through a robust education system, be able to appreciate where their country came from. But we have 10-year-olds who know a German flag more than a Ugandan flag. You don't need to blame them. We have 10-year-olds today who can tell you all about global life.
And that's why I make the point of whether or not NRM as a
yes,
government is changing as fast.
Exactly. So
as
NRM, instead of doing that, 29 years, they've actually collapsed that education system.
And
that's a challenge.
Yes, and that's where Mary needs to come in. Do you think as NRM you need to be doing a little bit more soul searching? That you need to be a little bit more appreciative of the Uganda before NRM came to power, to place it in proper context, to move this country and the young generation forward? Tomorrow you have you have two parallel events happening. There's a group of youth who wants to do an event at Nambole tomorrow. They were in a meeting with the Prime Minister the other day to kind of distract from the national celebrations in Soroti, because you have internal contradictions. Do you think you need to be doing a little bit more soul searching?
A chance, I don't know, because Uganda, the same, by the way, let me just note this, the same vice that you're actually citing on the side of us, NRM, is the very vice that is even in the media. We tend to have this other poetic sort of mastering a script of everything. Even all these shows, I'm sorry to say, you'll find that it is a script mastered and people are analyzing, and even the mode of moderation. But if I'm to understand the show of today, we are focusing at the commemoration of Liberation Day tomorrow. And by the mere fact that it is a commemoration, it doesn't divorce us from speaking about the past, because what we are commemorating was actually ushered in because of the history that we share. And people have a problem.
But the presentation of that history is a question that we need to debate.
I have a problem, because even when you go to the debate of East African integration, all that, people are actually saying by the mere fact that we have shared histories, that draws us to come together. But also, speaking about the message, what message are we speaking about? The same message is about infrastructure, it's about the economy, it's about the health sector, the education sector. And by the mere fact that we have people like Chris Obore, we have Alan, we have other analysts who actually question some of these policies that were brought in by NRM, they warrant a response. And the response is actually directed towards in the very breath in which they ask. Yes, we have a change in the population, and perhaps we should be speaking of a different message. But what better message can you have for a youthful generation that you need to show and give hope for the future? Because what's happening in Uganda right now, the forces that are at play in the political arena are actually giving a different message of no hope. So somebody who wants to give,
but I think that's inevitable in a political situation.
It is inevitable.
It is inevitable that people will not necessarily agree with the way you see things.
Exactly answering. So, in a political arena, when there is a negative information that's being given, hope being
but you have had 29 years.
But I think when you talk about hope,
listen to this.
We're coming to the question of hope in the next segment.
Yes.
But you have had 29 years to articulate your message, to articulate your policies, to show this young generation that this is where we're going. And that doesn't seem to be coming out. Even when the president speaks tomorrow, you'll not see where we are going coming out as prominently. Unless if he's watching the show and decides to change his speech, or maybe people are going to. The question of, we've been so much tied to that history that there was nothing happening. And like Alan said, you have all these, half the Ugandan population, actually, below 15 years.
Charles, I'm surprised you're one of those who don't understand.
But you see, not understanding is not necessarily Charles's problem. Sorry, let me just make this point, because it agrees with you.
What Mzee does, he actually, his speeches, he will draw from the history and then show you where we've reached. And then
he will say, when we came into power in 1986, we were
and then he will tell you, this is where we've reached.
Gentlemen and ladies, let's take a quick break and come back and pick this discussion up with the hope and the message for the future. message and the messaging by the National Resistance Movement as it marks 29 years in power tomorrow. Some people have been saying, is it NRM at 29 or President Museveni at 29? And you're making a point which I needed you to conclude just before I took the break.
Yes.
The message of hope that you're talking about.
Yes.
Sometimes sometimes it happens that an individual thinks they have achieved so much that they don't look beyond the achievement. And the message is tied around, I have done this, I have done that, I have done that, and that limits the world view for the future. And sometimes the NRM is seen as getting itself tied into that, without saying we have built so many kilometers of road, we have built so many classroom blocks.
That doesn't make sense to
yes,
young people.
We have moved, we moved from 2.6 million children who are going to primary school in 1997 to 7 million, 7.2 million.
Yes.
But nobody addresses the question of how many do you graduate at the end of 7 years? What quality do they get? Those you graduate, the 500 you graduate, what quality of education do they have? And how does that project them into the future?
And also, I love the way Alan actually puts it and says, depending on who is speaking. Actually, even the way we are speaking about it, that seems not to be the problem of Ugandans. The problem right now, people will tell you, actually, the problem is the numbers that you get out of the higher institutions of learning, and where are they going in the job market?
Because so you forget the bulk that remains in the middle.
Yes, the problem is not so much of even how many drop out, but actually even the very generation, the youthful people you're speaking about, by the mere fact that we can speak about them and they need to be given a message, they are also an achievement of the system. Because if the system didn't put in place structures that actually ensured they are healthy, alive, went through that education, then we would be speaking of
Mary, you come from Busoga sub-region.
Yes.
It's the poster child of underdevelopment in many respects. People talk about Busoga as one of those areas where poverty is still in extreme, is still extreme. And when you are speaking to the people, you're speaking about their poverty, how much they haven't made that progress. But when you come to the podium on giving a political speech at the national level, that seems to get lost. All these members of parliament will be telling you, we are spending so much money. Last week, Alan, they launched a report, a survey among members of parliament on money in politics and how much they're spending. They're saying, we're spending so much money trying to help our people. But that discussion doesn't seem to be evidenced.
Because the politicians, some will say, are corrupt, because this money gets lost, because they look forward to the next election so they can position themselves appropriately and make money off it. Arguments have been made along those lines. But the one point that I'd like to aver, and even if I don't speak again after this, is the fact that, young people will say that she talks articulately about hope, but what is hope? What does that mean in their context? Because when they have no jobs and they go to the streets, and they say they have no jobs, they get rounded up and bangled onto the back of pickups and thrown into jail, and then everything, and as a result, there'll be other young people looking at that and wondering if this is the hope that she talks about. I think, like she said earlier on, I think it would be naive to sort of negate the achievements that have been made. You go everywhere in the world, and Uganda, it's no longer embarrassing to say that I'm Ugandan. But when you concentrate on the achievements and forget how to sustain those and not talk so much about how else to build on those, you wonder how those achievements can be sustained. And then you talk about the children that are coming through. Is their quality good enough to sustain the achievements? You wonder about the university. Talk to people who recruit university graduates. Can they write a paragraph in the English that they've been taught in all their lives? Can they actually write an articulate piece, a submission that you would be proud of? Are they the caliber that will sustain the achievements or not?
You see, Charles,
yes,
when we
Chris.
talk about government, we are talking about paying taxes, and we're talking about distribution of benefits. That's essentially what we're addressing. And when we talk about 29 years of NRM, I look at it essentially from the taxes and the benefits. Who pays what cost and who gains what? This is my main frame of analysis of these issues. And I don't like to take the positional point of view, you are for us or against us, which has tended to become the modus operandi of Ugandan politics. You are either in opposition or you are either in the NRM. And each one has blocked their ears to understand a message that benefits everyone, including those in power. It is even worse if those in power begin also to say, we are us, they are against us. Once you're in power, even those in opposition are within your responsibility because they don't cease being citizens, even when they oppose you. So what we are saying,
but there is a responsibility on those in the opposition
what
to
we are
appreciate
saying,
to be objective.
Once there's a government in the power, the opposition will become like any other actors. What they say doesn't matter. That's why the legitimacy of the state. It is the state that has the responsibility to deliver. The opposition can be, government can know how to deal with them. It is within their right to oppose. So what I'm telling Mutes here, it is not about frowning at NRM. It's critiquing the performance of NRM. There are too many issues in the public arena in this country. And they continue being misunderstood or understood depending on how government responds to them. This is how government should be operating. This debate you are talking about are a feedback mechanism for the state. But increasingly, we are not seeing government translating what's in the public agenda into government agenda. And eventually take it into institutional agenda where now you see results, where you see outputs. So when we talk about building a sustainable economy, today we are still crying about mobilizing people for production. How can it be mobilizing people for 29 years?
But one of the things that I noticed, I've just done a documentary, if I may. Chris, sorry.
I want to conclude this thought. So if we are still mobilizing peasants for production in 29 years, you are still talking about NADs in 29 years. You're still talking about
what would you
can I just say something?
What do you have to talk about?
The point I'm building
about how many years you take mobilization.
The point I'm building
but
here
the issue is about the process of transformation.
But even then, listen. But even up to now, sir,
because
there is no. Just listen.
Let me just make this. You intend to insinuate that actually mobilization for production should be a project because projects have a lifetime.
What they are mobilizing, there is always a result. Mobilization is a continuous process.
Oh, yes.
But if you started it 1 year ago, you must be doing a monitoring and an evaluation and an analysis in 1 year so far. What is the journey like? But our journey is stagnant. That please are not
increasingly, one of the things that I've noticed.
So as I conceded to Alan, you must agree that because of that thinking within the NRM, you have reduced the president into praising the exploits of the thieves.
Can I just say
no, we have hotels. Who built it? You can't understand.
Yes.
How did we build it? You don't understand. But you're praising a hotel.
One of the things that I've just done a documentary in Uganda that is going to run on the BBC in a few weeks. One of the things that I've noticed is that young people in Uganda increasingly are sort of asking for the bare minimum. They want electricity, they want an internet connection, and the rest, they don't really care about the government and what the government does, because there is a sort of disconnect. I spoke to a young man who told me, actually a bunch of young people who told me that we don't really care about the politics anymore. What we want to do is to be able to do our own thing. And so for as long as they can do that, for as long as they can set up a business and go and get paid using their talents, for as long as they have an internet connection that is sustainable, they have power that is sustainable, they really have no problem with it. And the only time that they will have a problem with the government is when those things are not working. So increasingly, I think there is a critical mass of young people who are trying to find their own solutions to the challenges that we see that exist.
That's where we have a problem. The representation of that loner voice about actually internet is very minimal, because that is the
I'm not
problem
sure I understand what you mean.
Where we go as analysts, as political actors and professionals, we tend to listen so much to loner voices of elitist thinking. Because if you cite
that's an old NRM argument.
I think that's
an old NRM argument, an argument that has been around for quite a while.
I think that's where the difference is.
I mean,
many Ugandans have tended to withdraw from government. Peasants think, I need to find my own way to get to hospital, I need to find my own way to educate my child, and that is what feeds corruption. Because Mary is not thinking that whichever school I take my child to, they will be guaranteed a good education. So you find a way to take your child to a better school. that essentially means you have given up on government. If you're thinking,
No, actually,
if a relative of yours falls sick, they will not think of being rushed to the nearest health center. They'll think of calling you. What would be a solution? Can you get on the bus and come to Kampala? Or can I send you a vehicle to come and pick you? That is a withdrawal from government.
I don't know if it's an entirely bad thing that people are moving away from the government.
Yes,
Can I just make this point? Can I just make this point, Mary?
Sure.
I don't think it's an entirely bad thing.
I
don't think it's an entirely bad thing because some people will say that that allows the government to concentrate on the strategic things.
And that's the question. Yes, and that's the issue.
Yeah, and whether or not the government is concentrating on the strategic things is a debate for another day. But I think if the environment allows for people to thrive
on their own,
I think it creates more independence. But whether or not that works for everybody is different because access to resources differs from one person to another.
And the question, like Chris, is when government appropriates this withdrawal and claims credit for it without showing that this is what we're planning at a strategic level, this is where we're going. That's where the debate is. That's the question I asked Mary. Are you doing some soul searching?
Government should not even be happy that people are doing from believing in government. That is a debate of free market economy versus hierarchical economy where government intervenes. But that debate is continuous. We can't even conclude it here. But if there are those people in Uganda who believe they can operate independent of government, I must tell them, think twice. You can only, that is looking at individual.
I thought you're encouraging them too.
No. When you encourage them to become innovative and enterprising, it doesn't mean they should be blind to what the government does. This is a difference. Here, they are taking innovation and creativity to mean be blind to government. Government is influential in your life in everything. Until you discover that your own creativity without good power tariffs means nothing, then discover that, hey, I should have had a better government. So what we're saying here is, it is not correct for you to say, we don't care about government. Because that government is you. That government taxes you. It takes money from you. Even if you go and start whatever you start, URA will come. So you must be mindful to know where are you taking, what you're taking as URA. So entrepreneurship, innovation, creativity, individual at the individual level should not be taken to mean ignoring what government does. The other thing is, if you notice increasingly, if we don't pay attention to government actions, we are putting Uganda into a debt trap. As we speak, we're about 14 trillion of public debt. And we are eating the future of our grandchildren. And we are happy to say we are rolling out infrastructure. So I worry. That's why I talked about present-orientedness versus future-orientedness. Because the president is boxed into praising exploits of a few Mangushias, Mutesis, who have used the state badly to acquire what they have.
I'm just using
that. Exactly. You see, I'm using that. So here's the point. So the president is told, they now aggregate that. And they say, you know, today we have hotels. When I move in a plane, I feel Mabad houses in all of Teso. He doesn't ask who in Teso owning that Mabad house. In the same Mabati houses,
but
they
hold on. Not own Mabati in
come on. You even know today how many people own radio stations. One can own 6. But statistically, you will say Uganda has got 200 radio stations. Owned by who? Alan Kasuja.
No, but
you don't know that there are others who can't even get a license. So please, when we are talking about this democracy, let us not talk either to promote propaganda or to undermine government.
Chris,
the feedback I'm giving
is not about
so what I'm saying,
but we are just as Alan said and
exactly
and Charles, we are making reflections.
Exactly, and I'm saying
both good and bad.
But and I'm saying,
you can present your own.
Let's reflect about the future.
That's the point. NRM needs to learn to listen more.
Okay,
that's when it will become relevant to you and me. But if it doesn't listen, we're going to have this cycle. Because Alan, you know it, you're in the BBC. A country of 14 trillion debt should be worried. Don't be told about a road without knowing that those who have got kickbacks from these contracts are apparently happy now. But they have laid a trap for children unborn.
But if you
Yes,
if you
student
build the road
loan.
and stimulate
It's
development in
dangerous.
an area, you can pay off the 14 trillion. But let's discuss that
That's
because
why
one
we
of the
have
major
banks
questions.
also lending loans to people.
One of the major questions.
So should their
Actually,
their families actually mourn
if you
because dad
if you
bought
go to
one
bank-
when we come back from the
from
break,
loan?
Mary,
I mean,
if you go to banking,
Mary and Chris.
That is how economies
Mary,
function.
Mary and
We
Chris.
should not
the
divorce
banking
ourselves.
sector in Uganda,
when we
has
come back from
Chris
the
Charles is
discussion,
talking now.
yes, when you come back from the discussion, the investment in infrastructure and the cost of that investment and what it means to the future generation of this country. We'll be right back. Welcome to this last segment of the Fourth Estate, and we're discussing NRM at 29. Celebrations will be held in Soroti tomorrow, taking stock of the last 29 years, but also looking to the future. I want to start with you, Alan, again. Is it a problem of the leadership? Is there a problem with the people of Uganda? Have we evolved in a way that we think this is a country we need to build, and we can, as people, guide government on where we want to go?
I don't know if the government is supposed to help us do everything that we're supposed to do. I think ultimately there is some personal responsibility, and whether or not we are taking, responsibility as we should is a matter that is open to debate. But also, when you think about the current cadres of the NRM, and you're trying to define who they are, who are they? What do they read? Do they read Fukuyama, Francis Fukuyama? Do they read? What do they read? Do they quote Fanon? What are they reading? Because the guys of the past,
Lee Kuan Yew. They used to. I don't know.
the guys of the past, the people that ushered in the 1986 lot, were very clear about what their ideological leanings were, what they stood for. You knew President Museveni was quoting Karl Marx everywhere. He was quoting Adam Smith and all these things. But what about the current crop of cadres? Does NRM have a 21st century cadre that is supposed to propel it to the next so many years? Do they have the quality, or do they have the depth, the quality, the vision that will build on whatever gains have been achieved over the last 29 years?
Someone will ask and say, has the NRM over the period of 29 years allowed that growth?
But how is it supposed to allow that growth? How is it supposed to allow that growth? NRM will argue, I'm sure, that they provide an environment, the growth takes place. You put a seed in a fertile piece of soil. Do you force the seed to grow? I don't think so. And I think the key point that needs to be made here is whether or not that some people will argue that if NRM wants to see itself relevant and actually progressing into the future, it really needs to think about who the cadres are, the people responsible for that growth, for that movement. And if they are, and what they stand for, do they embrace East Africanism as the NRM seems to be leaning, or do they even understand it, or are they still lost in this entity that is in Uganda and are obsessing over it? And I think those are the questions, the quality of the cadres
that needs to be answered.
Yeah,
Chris, let me turn it to you. Is there a process that should facilitate that kind of thinking that Alan is talking about? Does the NRM have a responsibility, especially the elders in the NRM, to say, from our generation, the next generation, the generation after, has that kind of, is tuning their mind to think Pan-African, to evaluate our involvement in Somalia, in South Sudan, in Central African Republic, from a much broader perspective, but also think about that ideological grounding?
I think NRM has, let's first agree, NRM has very beautiful proposals. Very, very beautiful. And when you talk about the original NRM ideologues, they have very beautiful proposals. The only thing which is undermining NRM is the ugly actions of its own activists and its cadres. The other is that NRM has managed to restore the state, the modern state as it is, but it has been falling short in handling intra-conflicts within this country. And it is sometimes tries to ignore the gravity of that conflicts. I will tell you, the people of Toro, Bakonji are talking about, are trying to resolve their conflicts. I think there's a conference taking place there. To me, that's the beginning of the healing of Uganda.
It's called Kasunga 7.
Something like
they've
that.
been doing for the last 7 years.
Those mechanisms are very important in determining how Uganda will be. Then, even ICC, we discussed on when last time, ICC is just, but what happens between the Batoro and the Bakonjo,
and the Bamba,
that dialogue is more critical for the unity of Uganda tomorrow than anything else people can talk about. So increasingly in Uganda, the elite want to project a Uganda where tribe, ethnicity don't matter. Of course they don't. But the reality is they do exist. And who propagates this? It's the elite and the political class. Increasingly, there's actually a tragedy in this country. Increasingly, the Bores are happier marrying Batoro women. The Bachiga women are happy marrying the Choli men, the Luo men.
You say that's tragic?
No, listen. But at the political arena, you find the politics feeling that they're actually feeling alienated from the political arena, from the benefit that accrue from Uganda as a nation. That means there is no bigger problem at the interpersonal relationship.
Where's the problem?
The problem of Uganda is at the political relationship. That means the political elite have a duty to do. If they continue propagating
but
this...
But Museveni gets voted by Ugandans from all over the
fine,
country.
and that's another problem. Using a vote as a measure of people's relations.
Why not?
A vote comes in very many dimensions. We can't go there. There are very many reasons to vote.
Buying.
But these are issues, Alan, you know this. But this issue I'm telling you, Ugandans at a very personal level, Ugandans relate very well. I'm telling you, go every weekend in Uganda.
But that's not unique to Uganda.
Yeah, no. The difference in Uganda is, while Kasuja is happy to go to Kitigum for Kwanjula and they are celebrating and what. But once come to politics, people will say, for us in the north, we are not part of this thing. So the problem is not the people. The problem is at the leadership. And then the other thing as you go to Mutesi, let us remove Ugandans from celebrating temporal achievements. The temporality of our thinking is going to be our greatest problem. We see something now, we think, oh, we have got it. Alan was teasing us off the show that you can go and pick a record as old as 600 years in the UK. But in Uganda, we are, even the record of 1986 to date, you hardly find it. We're even erasing the old record. We are defining Uganda as January 26, 1986, which is a tragedy for our country.
Let's bring
we need to define a value system
that
cuts across. It needs to be there to inform the kind of progress we desire.
Mary, the contradictions within the national resistance movement that rolled over the last year, the uncertainty about how you transition from President Yoweri Museveni to another leader. You may not want to admit that, but the NRM has demonstrated, sole candidate 2016, President Yoweri Museveni. There are billboards all over the place. There have been campaigns all over the country. And people asking, if the NRM has not resolved those internal contradictions in a way that projects to the future, then everybody has to be worried about what the future holds. Is that something that the president will speak to tomorrow?
All political parties have their internal contradictions, and NRM is not actually divorced from that kind of fact. But the question of transition seems also to be occupying the minds of people so much. But before I
it should after 29 years, shouldn't it?
To transition equations. Actually, Alan mentioned a very important thing, and I just want also to nip in and add in. He says actually that responsibility should not be only be taken to the side of the leadership and government, but also to pass on responsibility. This draws us to this very debate, actually. Speaking of economy, speaking of the way people are acting, actually I've realized that in Uganda, the vice that's eating us, although he speaks of it from a propagandist point of view, and he's speaking of the presentism, you know, celebrating
the
and
now.
looking at the now factor. But actually, it is something that's within the mindset of us. We are so much into consumerism. The saving culture has not yet been developed, and it is at personal level.
I thought actually this is some of the achievement that is being celebrated by the NRM, the consumerism, celebrating achievement in shopping malls,
No, those shopping malls are not bad per se. He's now in BBC and all that. There in London, he will tell you there are malls everywhere. Go to Nairobi.
But they're sustained by production.
Full of malls
Yes,
and all that.
they're sustained by production.
Sustained by production and all that. You can talk. But actually, the problem is that I love local music. One person sang a song and asked, when you move during the day, these people tell you we don't have money, but at night you find them actually eating cash. And she was asking, where do you where does this money come that you eat at night? So, and look at even the graduates that we are talking about. These days, our time we were speaking of Mizigo from hostel, actually we could stay in hostel for the next 3 years looking for how to find life around Kampala. These days, people are speaking in terms of apartments. Apartments in terms of 800,000 per month. And somebody is telling you, this is the cheapest I could find, but actually the others are this much. And you're looking at this person, how do you sustain this life? The next anything is a posh car. So actually the point, responsibility also, we should take it away from government and also look at changing the population, the mindset. But getting back to the intra-party politics that you're speaking about within NRM, and it's very important that on such a show, and when we are just in the eve of liberation commemoration, we should be speaking about this party. Of course, it's getting into the country, wasn't at a party level, but as events unfolded within the country, the debate came in as to whether we should go on with the movement system and now to multi-party system. Now the NRM we are speaking about is a political party. Yes, the whole of last year we had the events as you watched them, but at the end of the day, where have they left NRM?
Where have they left NRM?
NRM is much stronger. NRM is moving on.
Is it?
And actually we
when you have
organized.
when you have a group of your youth trying to organize a parallel event tomorrow?
Of course, I usually
when no one can be certain that
these are dynamics.
Yes, I usually actually laugh. And there was even a group, I don't know whether they are the very people, the poor youths and all that.
You have poor youth, you have unemployed youth, you have
poor youths, unemployed youths. Now, Alan,
and these are forming themselves into groups.
Let me make this analysis. Yes. Let's start with the poor youths. Who are the brains behind the poor youth?
But you see, I knew that you were going to say that.
Yes.
I knew you were going to say that.
You know?
Because you're going to politicize what is an obvious problem.
Yeah.
You know, we have unemployment, and unemployment is not something that we can run away from.
Yes, it is not something we can run away from.
Let me just give you a statistic. Please allow me, Mary.
Can you allow Alan to come?
Please allow me. Please allow me. I don't mean to. For a few years ago, the statistics suggested that 400,000 young people left tertiary institutions every year, but only 80,000 of them
could get a job.
What's the word?
Were
not just recruited, but were absorbed within both the private and public sector, and that left a deficit of 320,000 young people. And I don't know if those statistics still hold, but you have to wonder what happens to those 320,000, and then that happens year on year on, and I think. I don't know if you speak as a politician, Mary, but it's some people will say it's easy to politicize, something like that. We're not really interested in who is behind the young people and them, whatever. Nobody's.
But I
think what is more interesting. What is more interesting is what is being done to ensure that they don't feel left out. What is being done to make sure that the young people that are going on the streets and saying that they have no jobs are not beaten up and thrown on the back of a picker, because they might actually be representing very many other young people who are in their positions. And whereas the politicians might think that there is a political problem with it, and they need to address it, I think those young people have to be heard as well. But let me just make one very brief point about the nature of the NRM as it is right now. I was speaking to a very good friend of mine, and he explained that the NRM as it is more like a centrist democracy. You know, it's got some democratic credentials, but it has a leader, and whatever is decided within the party must hold. And when they decide that we are going to kick out Babazi, Babazi will be kicked out. When they decide that this man is going to be the sole candidate, that is going to be the line that is towed. And the NRM has sort of reinvented itself on a regular basis. Maybe, I don't know if they've reinvented itself since the privatization. But if you recall, 1986, they came in as Marxists. Then they decided, let's go free economy a year later, after Tumusiime Mtabile convinces them that that's the direction to take. And then after a while, they decided, let's go into privatization and get rid of and that is a very big decision that they made, because they suddenly have a laissez-faire economy that emerges from that.
And then at some stage they decide to mix. They're saying we have a mixed economy.
Yeah, but now what is interesting now is how they're going to sort of reinvent themselves into the 21st century. And it goes back to the people who speak for the NRM. It goes back to the people who represent the NRM.
Charles, what is
yes, please.
I agree with the submissions of Alan, but the different thing in Alan is how do they call it, at economics, new public management. That's the school it comes from. Private sector, government has no business.
No, he's actually talking about the evolution of the NRM.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the school of running NRM is explaining. But I, Chris Obore, I'm a believer in the state, and a strong state. A state that's able to steer and represent the interests of the citizens. Whether private sector, that the state must have a say in that private sector. Interventionist. That's what I believe. Our problem is that we have weaker states in Africa, and they are overrun by private interests, and the citizens become at the mercy of private capital, and that's why they see poverty becoming a challenge to NRM.
I thought actually the states in Africa are selectively efficient.
No, they are not selective. I will come to that. I'm coming to that eventually. See, I believe in a strong state, and that's why I'm proud of National Water and Sewerage Corporation. I'm very happy with Engineer Silva Mugisha, a young man in his 40s, running a public entity in a commercial manner and commercially viable. Can you imagine? So Silva Mugisha to me is worth than World Bank. In my thinking, I would praise Silva Mugisha because he's running that entity, not sold, it's viable, irrespective of the challenges it has. It is even better than some of the private companies. So what I'm trying to say, in the transition to Museveni is going to be complicated. Because even the private sector, Charles, we have no jobs for young graduates, but we are praising a private sector where some clerk in the judiciary or senior accountant or audit assistant has a chain of schools. He has 10 of them. He has an import and export business, Chikubo, run by his wife, but it's clung to a small office desk in the government, that is serving government. And that's the private sector.
Where did the money come from?
It just tells you, minus this government small office, the business is not there. And that's what I'm saying. Let's not celebrate that. Let's not deceive the president to celebrate the aggregate, the number of schools in Uganda, without understanding how the schools came. Remove the man from that office, the schools can collapse. We even have ministers who are supposed to supervise our education system. Do you know inspection of schools has collapsed? An inspector is small in the chain of education, in seniority. Now, if you are going to inspect schools owned by your minister,
how do you
are supposed to give feedback to the same ministry. The man you are supposed to inspect determines your career. You can see how that conflict destroys service provision. So as you go to medicine, these are very important issues dear to me, by the way. So as long as we allow a predatory private sector, that is the feeding of government, and we are saying that now things are growing, we are cheating the taxpayer. And the other thing is moving away from Museveni. Uganda post Museveni.
That's a question we'll discuss.
A very bigger challenge than what we think is a challenge.
Can we come to that briefly after Mary has come in? Mary, you're talking about this private sector-led economy, and you look at who is manufacturing something, who is producing something, and most of it is in the hands of non-native Ugandans.
Yes.
Ordinary Ugandans are not into producing
and the native Ugandans are in the government.
Yes, into producing anything. The wealth of Ugandans that everybody is pricing is seen on the road, in the type of cars they drive, in the type of houses they own. But that is dead capital. It doesn't produce anything. Is this something that you think should make government or even Ugandans comfortable?
Whether it makes government or Ugandans comfortable, you and I, at whatever platforms that are available to us, we should assist ourselves as Ugandans. The message we disseminate out there will help to change mindsets. And your analysis is okay. actually, the achievements we are speaking of in terms, actually the question right now, we may actually try even to draw it from the bigger picture of the economy, but now to financial management, financial discipline, period. And that is the point I was speaking about, the consumerism.
The contradiction that people point out. One of the biggest stories last year was the collapse of Sembule. We were talking about it with Alan before he came on set. Where are these Ugandan companies? You asked about Z-Coffee?
Yeah, it used to be.
Coffee? Yes,
Yeah.
they used to be. All these big guys have completely disappeared.
That's exactly what we should be doing.
And we have seen progressively government give bailouts to...
But what has that got to do with NRM?
What we should be doing.
What has that got to do with NRM?
Yes,
because,
good question.
What does it have
to do with NRM?
Depending on who you speak to, someone from the opposition will say the NRM has failed those businesses. But then you also have to wonder, do I expect, as Alan Kasuja, NRM to put food on my table?
No. Alan, the question is...
Do I expect
the
NRM
question has been,
to
but I think
look at the incentive structure provided by what the government has called an investor.
And
if you, Alan,
came
from London with a guy you picked off the street and worked with them, you will have a pass that gets you to State House, and you meet the president and say, this guy has invested so much, he's going to bring in £1 million to invest in something, and you will be given assistance.
You know, those are the internal problems.
Those
are the internal problems.
As opposed to Alan coming with Chris Obore and saying, we have this idea. Where can we get help?
You see, if I had an idea with Chris Obore, Chris Obore has a track record as a journalist. I have my own fair share of track record, having worked in Uganda and elsewhere. I don't know at what point the government would come in. You know, I would sit down with Chris over coffee and decide on what we are going to do. And if the environment allows for us to succeed in that context, we wouldn't care about
I think
NRM.
we have very little time to get out of here, so we're going to end the discussion. I'm sorry, we're going to end this discussion by each one of you making a comment about the transition from President Museveni to the next, especially with the sole candidature already in. Is that something that the NRM had thought about and is prepared to deal with?
A transition is a very wide and extensive, actually, topic that needs its own depth. But to me, from my own...
You're a lawyer, so you surely know how to give a straight answer.
Let me just make my statement. To NRM as a party, to me, I think it's very okay to build a consensus over a candidate, because also we have a force that we are going to meet that is also preparing to bring a sole candidate.
Thank you. Chris, your 30 seconds take on that.
Very terrible thing. When Obore and Alan started their own TV, and they still want to work on NTV, then there must be something wrong with their heads. And that has affected the economy. What am I saying? I am very angry.
Can you speak to the transition?
Yes, I'm angry. I am angry with people who tell our graduates to create their own jobs. There are guys who have created their own jobs and they fear their own jobs. They still want to feed off government. Stop that nonsense of rhetoric and live by what you say.
You've lost your 30 seconds.
Museveni, Charles, to annoyance of Mary, Museveni is a skilled dictator. I wish you knew what
skilled dictator?
Yes, a skilled dictator. I wish you knew that he was a skilled dictator.
Thank you.
You do know why he will remain here. A skilled dictator knows to give some outlets, democracy, fine, media, fine, it's okay. But essentially, he's in control.
Thank you.
When he wants to disband
Alan, your 30 seconds.
He will disband it.
But I've seen a dictator on this show and he's Chris.
He
doesn't allow others to...
I have no political side. I'm neither FDC, NRM. I'm none of that.
Neither am I.
Moving forward, Uganda sort of has a way of taking care of itself. Even in its darkest moments, Uganda sort of took care of itself. And Museveni is an individual, and he can only play his part. Beyond that, Uganda seems to just have a way of taking care of itself. And it helps. And I think to center the discussion around President Museveni might be to miss the point. Uganda is bigger than
we don't want to be beholden to the mafia around. President Museveni has played his part.
Those are your words.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Don't follow captive to mafia interests.
Chris,
that's when he becomes a nationalist.
We agreed that we're going to end the show now. You took your 30 seconds. Thank you very much, Mary.
So Chris hasn't stopped misbehaving.
Yes, since your day.
Yeah, he's still misbehaving.
That's the character of the fourth estate.
Alan,
also speaking of the transition, when will he leave the fourth estate so that we get other panelists?
We'll be very happy whenever you're in town to have you join us here.
NRM wants you off the program, Chris.
I don't mind. Speaking on behalf of NRM.
They want
But I'm
relief of
speaking
many
of a
things.
transition.
Thank you very much to
They
all
want
our
relief of
viewers.
many things, even life.
Can we end the show? Thank you very much to you all our viewers. Do join us again next Sunday. Have a good night.